For the Pharisees, they would have expected a Jewish father to have a funeral, disown his son, and let him experience the just consequences of his actions, which would have been death. But this father is so shocking. He not only gives 1/3 of his property to his son, he not only restores his son back to his house, he lets his son become a son again to protect him, and he's been waiting every day for this moment. And then the turning point is verse 17 for this younger son. But when he came to himself, that's the word, the idea, picture of repentance. Repentance literally means a change of mind. Now his mind has changed because all of a sudden, instead of seeing his father in a negative light, he starts to see his father's generosity. And then he says, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? In other words, I'm living worse than a slave of my father. What am I doing here? Now, he would have known. There's no way he could ever become a son again because he would have assumed his father would have had a funeral. His father would have publicly disowned him. So he has no chance of being a son again. But maybe he's saying to himself, if I could beg, maybe I can become a slave, work for my dad, because at least I know my dad's a generous boss because all his hired servants eat well. So that's what he's going to do, he says to himself. So notice verse 18. He has a speech that he's going to repeat to himself over and over again. I will arise, go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And so this speech, he's going to repeat to himself over and over and over again. How do we know? Because when he finally sees the father, he starts saying this exact same word. So this is on his mind. As he's walking back, he's thinking to himself, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. So he arose and he starts walking to his father's house, or, the place that his father lived. Now, we notice something about what's happening here. Where's the father in this story? Verse 20, and he arose and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. Wait a minute. This should catch your attention. Because for a rich Jewish father, there will be like a house, but then he had a lot of land, and he'll have gates around his land. He would have stayed inside the house, typically. So as he's walking here, his father's not here seeing him. It says, while he was a far way off, meaning he's not that close to here, his father sees him, which assumes what? Where's the father? He's not in the house. Where is he? He's outside of the gates. In fact, he's not just outside of his house gate, he's outside of the city gate. He probably went there every day just checking, just making sure. Is he coming back today? Okay, not today. This is my son? Okay, not yet. Every day he went out to the city gate. And here's why. Why didn't the father just wait for his son to walk into the city gate, walk into his house gate, and come into his house? Why didn't the father just wait for that? Because according to the Mosaic covenant, when you dishonor your father and mother, what's the penalty? Death. What did the father know will happen if his son happened to walk in and the villagers found him before he got to him? He would have been killed. So the father goes out, probably every day, making sure I got to intercept my son before the villagers get to them. Because it's not an angry mob. They will actually execute justice. They will have every right to stone my son because he did dishonor me. But I got to get to him first. In fact, in verse 20, look at what it says here. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran. Now, the Pharisees at this point, okay, their head is already exploding. This is like the worst father ever. Like, what is wrong with this guy? He really doesn't care about his honor. But at this point, when they heard the word ran, they would have fainted. And this is why. Rich Jewish fathers and rich aristocrats in general, rich men, they wore long robes because robes was a sign of honor. Now, I don't wear dresses, but I talk to my wife who wears a dress. And if we go to a wedding and I'm running ahead of her, she really hates it because what do you have to do to run? You got to lift it up and your knees start showing and your legs start showing. Now, did you know for Jewish people to show your knees was super shameful? It would be like you running naked. In fact, according to the priests in the Mosaic law, if they're offering sacrifice and even if blood got on their robe, they can't lift it up. They're not supposed to show your knees to anybody. This father, in order to get to his son as quickly as possible, what does he do? He doesn't care about his personal honor. He what? Shames himself and runs. He exposes his knees. Why is he doing this to himself? Because he's trying to protect his son. This is why he's so shocking to the Pharisees here. In fact, the word run is the word that's used to describe a race in a stadium. He's not going to wait there just hoping his son gets to him just in time. He's thinking, just in case anybody sees my son, they're going to kill him. I got to run to him quickly because the father has a plan of what he will do once he sees his son. What did he do? Let's continue on. And the son said to him, oh, he has a speech rehearsed, right? Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But what happened? He never got to finish his speech because what part of the speech did he not ever get to? Look back up to the previous verses. He said what? Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. What's the next sentence he was going to say? Treat me as whatever. What does it tell us? The father interrupts him. He doesn't even let him finish his speech. Because the son knows the only thing, the best case scenario is maybe he could be a slave. But the father doesn't even want to hear it. Because look what the father does. He tells his servants, bring quickly the best robe. Who owns the best robe? It belonged to whom? The father. So he puts his robe on him. Then he tells him, put a ring. What is a ring? The ring had the emblem of the family. It was a sign of authority. Only the father and the sons would have this ring. He says, get one of those rings and put it on his hand. And then what's the third thing he says? Bring him some shoes because slaves never wore shoes. Only sons could wear shoes in the father's house. So what are these three things that the father's trying to do? He's trying to restore his son back to his old status. Because what does he know? If he walks in that village and he doesn't have my robe and ring and shoes, everyone's going to assume that I have disowned him still and he should be stoned. But the father makes sure he restores him before he steps into the village so that what? When the villager comes up and they see, oh, well, he's a son again, then they can't kill him anymore. For the Pharisees, they would have expected a Jewish father to have a funeral, disown his son, and let him experience the just consequences of his actions, which would have been death. But this father is so shocking. He not only gives 1/3 of his property to his son, he not only restores his son back to his house, he lets his son become a son again to protect him, and he's been waiting every day for this moment. That is a picture of the father and this quote-unquote younger son who is a representation of what? Sinners.